Ethan Carter walked into the courthouse, his grip tightening around the divorce papers. The stark white pages felt heavier than they should have, as if they carried the weight of his last 3 years of marriage. Years he had spent waiting, hoping, and ultimately being disappointed. Across the table sat Olivia Parker Carter, his wife. No, soon-to-be ex-wife. She was as poised as ever, a picture of elegance in her tailored cream blazer and pencil skirt, her golden brown hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders. To anyone else, she looked composed, unaffected. To Ethan, she looked distant. She had always been distant. He watched as she reached for the pen, her fingers slender and graceful, but she didn't hesitate. She didn't pause. She didn't even glance at the papers, not even once. The tip of the pen pressed against the page, moving fluidly as she signed her name with the same practiced ease she used when approving business contracts. A quick signature. A clean break, no second thoughts. Ethan's chest tightened. That's it? After everything, after 3 years of being her husband, of standing by her, loving her, hoping she would one day turn and finally see him, this was all it took? His fingers curled into a fist beneath the table. If she had just looked a little closer, just for a second, she would have realized that this wasn't a business contract. This was the end of their marriage. But she didn't look. Because Olivia Parker Carter was focused on something, or rather, someone else. Ethan followed her gaze to the tall figure that had just entered the courthouse, Ryan Thompson. Of course, the man Olivia had never truly let go of. Ryan was dressed in a sharp navy suit, his presence commanding as always. He hadn't even noticed Olivia yet, but that didn't matter, because Olivia had noticed him. Ethan saw it. The way her eyes softened, the way her lips parted ever so slightly, as if she wanted to call out to him. The way, for the first time since she sat down, she actually looked present. Something inside Ethan snapped. He had been right all along. For 3 years he had told himself that maybe Olivia just needed time. Maybe she would eventually see him, see the way he loved her, see how much he tried. But now, as she signed away their marriage without a care, as she looked at another man with the kind of attention she had never given him, Ethan knew. He had never really been her husband. He had only ever been a placeholder. The pain was dull, not sharp. He had already been grieving this marriage for a long time. Ethan reached for the papers, his movements slow, measured. He didn't make a sound. Olivia didn't even glance at him as he rose to his feet. She had already forgotten he was there. He should have expected that. Without another word, without looking back, Ethan turned and walked out of the courthouse. And for the first time in years, he felt nothing at all. The first time Ethan Carter saw Olivia Parker, it was the beginning of their freshman year at Stanford University. It wasn't some grand cinematic moment, no slow-motion glances across a crowded room, no accidental brush of hands in a library. It was just her, standing under the California sun, laughing at something Ryan Thompson had said. That was all it took. Ethan had always been practical, grounded in reality. Love at first sight wasn't something he believed in. Until that day. There was something about the way she tilted her head when she laughed, the way her hazel eyes sparkled with unfiltered joy. She was magnetic. And just like that, he was pulled into her orbit. Ethan wasn't naive. He knew Olivia never saw him the way he saw her. To her, he was a friend, a study partner, a familiar presence in the lecture halls and late-night campus cafes. They worked on group projects together, sat across from each other during finals week, occasionally grabbed coffee between classes. She never hesitated to ask him for help with economics coursework, and he was always there. Because, deep down, a small part of him hoped that one day, she would notice. But Olivia's world had always revolved around someone else. Ryan Thompson. They had known each other since high school, and their friendship was effortless, in a way that Ethan's relationship with Olivia never was. Olivia gravitated toward Ryan naturally, always leaning just a little closer, always lighting up when he spoke. But Ryan never saw her that way. Ethan knew because he had watched as Olivia stole glances at Ryan when she thought no one was looking, watched as she laughed just a little too hard at his jokes, watched as she found excuses to be near him. And he had also watched Ryan fall in love with someone else. That should have been his chance. But Olivia never moved on. Even as Ryan started dating another girl, someone completely outside their circle, Olivia held on to something that never existed in the first place. Ethan thought maybe, just maybe, when Ryan moved away for graduate school, Olivia would finally let go. She didn't. By the time senior year rolled around, Ethan had forced himself to accept reality. Olivia would never love him, so he stopped waiting. After graduation, he took a high-paying job in New York, diving headfirst into his career. He worked long hours, buried himself in finance, in numbers, in anything that kept his mind occupied. He convinced himself that moving forward meant leaving Olivia behind. Meanwhile, Olivia left for Harvard Business School to pursue her MBA. Their occasional texts faded into silence. Their calls became nothing more than an afterthought. They drifted apart, just like any two people who were never meant to be. At least, that's what Ethan thought. He never expected their paths to cross again. He never expected that, years later, she would be the one to reach out. And he certainly never expected that when she did, it would be to ask him to marry her. Years passed. Ethan Carter had built a life for himself in New York, a successful career in finance, a steady routine, and a quiet acceptance of the fact that some things just weren't meant to be. Olivia Parker belonged to his past, or at least that's what he told himself. Then one night, she walked back into his life. The charity gala was like any other high-profile New York event. Crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, murmured conversations about stocks and acquisitions. Ethan hadn't planned on staying long, just long enough to make an appearance before slipping away unnoticed. And then, across the room, he saw her. Olivia. She looked different, yet exactly the same. Her posture was poised, her smile polished, but there was a tightness to it, a tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. She was beautiful, but she wasn't happy. They locked eyes, and in that moment, it was as if time folded in on itself. Stanford, late-night study sessions, unspoken words, one-sided love. Everything came rushing back. And then she walked toward him. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady but lacking warmth. He hadn't heard her say his name in years. They talked, small talk at first, polite pleasantries, catching up on the years between them. But then Olivia, always the type to get to the point, dropped the question that changed everything. "Would you ever consider getting married?" Ethan blinked. "Excuse me?" She didn't laugh. She didn't backtrack. She just held his gaze and said, "I need a husband, and I think it should be you." She told him about her family, the pressure, the expectations. The Parkers were old money, and her parents had made it clear. It was time for her to settle down. A suitable husband, a stable marriage, it was what was required of her. She had no interest in love, so she had come to him. Ethan should have hesitated. He should have asked why, out of everyone, she chose him. But he didn't, because he had spent years loving her, waiting for a chance that had never come. And now, she was offering him the role he had always wanted. So he said yes, without thinking, without asking questions, without considering what it would mean to be married to someone who had never loved him. The wedding was a quiet affair. No grand ceremonies, no headlines, no public announcements, just signatures on legal documents, witnessed only by their families. For the world, Olivia Parker remained an independent businesswoman focused on her career. No one knew she had a husband, and for a while Ethan convinced himself it was enough. She was his wife, after all, even if it wasn't real. The first few months of marriage felt like a dream, but not the kind that brings comfort. It was the kind where something always felt just slightly off, where reality twisted in ways that left Ethan feeling unsettled, unfulfilled. Olivia was his wife in name, but nothing more. She was never cruel, never unkind, but she was distant. She lived parallel to him, not with him. They shared an apartment in Manhattan, a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It should have felt like a home. It didn't. Olivia treated their marriage like a business arrangement, much like the way she had proposed it. They attended events together, posed for pictures when necessary, maintained the illusion of a functional couple. But the moment they stepped away from the public eye, she withdrew. Dinners were quiet. Conversations were polite but meaningless. When he reached for her hand, she barely noticed. When he spoke, she listened but never truly heard. And when the night stretched long and silent, they slept in separate rooms. Ethan told himself he could be patient, that she just needed time, that she would eventually learn to love him. But time did nothing, and one day he found the truth staring back at him from the past. It was an accident, really. He had been looking for some old paperwork in Olivia's study when he found it, a small, leather-bound photo album tucked away in a drawer. He almost left it untouched, but something made him open it, and there, neatly preserved between its pages, was a life that had nothing to do with him. Ryan Thompson. Photo after photo of him, from his teenage years to adulthood. Candid shots, pictures taken from a distance, newspaper clippings of his professional achievements. All carefully kept, all hidden away. Ethan felt his chest tighten, his hands gripping the album as a slow, heavy realization settled over him. It had always been Ryan. Even after all these years, even after Ryan had married someone else. She had never moved on. Ethan couldn't breathe. The pieces fell into place too easily. Olivia hadn't married him because she wanted to. She had married him because she needed an escape. Ryan had walked away, had built a life with someone else, completely unaware of what Olivia felt for him. And Olivia, unwilling to sit in the ruins of an unrequited love, had turned to the one person who had always been there. Him. She hadn't chosen Ethan, she had settled for him. He shut the album, forcing down the ache that clawed at his chest. He had always known she didn't love him. But this made it real. That night, as Olivia sat across from him at the dinner table, absent-mindedly scrolling through her phone, Ethan wondered if she ever thought about him the way she thought about Ryan. If she ever looked at him and felt even a fraction of what he felt for her. If she ever would. He should have walked away, should have let go, but instead, he did what he had always done. He stayed. Because some foolish part of him still believed that maybe, just maybe, one day she would see him. Ethan Carter had always known his marriage wasn't normal. He had known it from the very beginning, from the moment Olivia Parker had proposed like it was a business deal, from the first night they spent under the same roof, in separate rooms. He had known it every time she looked through him instead of at him. But knowing something and accepting it were two different things, and for a long time, he had refused to accept it. Their home in Manhattan was a masterpiece of modern design, sleek and elegant, just like Olivia. But for all its beauty, it was cold. Much like their marriage. Ethan had tried, he had tried. He planned dinner reservations at her favorite restaurants, but she was always too busy. He booked weekend getaways, only to have her cancel last minute for work. He brought home flowers, only to watch them wither, untouched in the vase. She never initiated conversations, never called first, never sent even the smallest of messages to ask how his day was. If he didn't reach out, there would be nothing but silence. Still, Ethan told himself that if he just put in more effort, things would change. That was a lie. Because Olivia didn't need more effort. She just didn't need him. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Ethan had been organizing their walk-in closet, more out of habit than necessity. Olivia was out at a business luncheon, and he figured it was better than sitting around, pretending that everything was fine. He was folding one of her silk blouses when a box slipped off the shelf, landing with a dull thud on the floor. At first, he wasn't going to open it. But then, he saw what was inside. A photo album. Small, leather-bound. It was old, the edges worn from being handled too often, the spine slightly bent. Ethan felt his stomach tighten as he flipped it open. Ryan Thompson. Page after page, year after year. Ryan at 17, playing football under the summer sun. Ryan at 20, smiling at a graduation ceremony Ethan had never been part of. Newspaper clippings of Ryan's professional achievements, interviews, candid photos taken afar. Even after getting married, Olivia had never stopped watching him. Never stopped caring. Never stopped loving him. Ethan's hands clenched around the edges of the album, his breathing unsteady. There was no trace of him in this book. Not a single photo of their wedding. No press articles about their marriage, no pictures of their life together. Because she had never wanted to remember this. She had only ever wanted to remember Ryan. Ethan sat there, staring at the photographs of the man his wife had never let go of. The jealousy that burned in his chest was unlike anything he had ever felt before. Sharp, raw, all-consuming. He had spent 3 years loving a woman who never once chose him. And now, as he held undeniable proof in his hands, he finally asked himself the one question he had been too afraid to face. Would she ever love him? The answer was staring back at him. And it wasn't him in the picture. Ethan Carter had spent years waiting for something that would never come. Waiting for Olivia to see him. Waiting for her to love him. Waiting for a sign that he wasn't just a placeholder. That night, he stopped waiting. It was nearly midnight when he heard the front door swing open, the sharp click of heels echoing through the penthouse. Olivia stumbled inside, laughing, a sound so rare that it made Ethan's stomach twist. He stepped out from the living room, watching as she leaned against the wall, struggling to unfasten the clasp of her purse. Her hair was slightly tousled, her cheeks flushed, her eyes brighter than he had ever seen them. She looked happy. Drunk, but genuinely happy. And Ethan knew instantly that it had nothing to do with him. Where were you? His voice was calm, too calm. Olivia barely glanced at him as she kicked off her heels, sighing in contentment. Out with friends, just celebrating. Celebrating. His chest tightened. He had never seen her like this, so light, so effortlessly happy. It wasn't the alcohol. It wasn't the party. It was something else. Or rather, someone. Olivia turned toward him then, still smiling, and for a second, a brief, fleeting second, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was looking at him. But then she spoke. He's finally leaving her. The words were soft, almost like a whisper. Ethan didn't have to ask who she was talking about. Ryan. The name wasn't spoken, but it was everywhere. In the way Olivia exhaled like a weight had finally been lifted. In the way her fingers trembled slightly, as if she couldn't contain the excitement. Ethan stood there, frozen, as the final piece of truth settled over him like a crushing weight. She had never once loved him. Not when she married him. Not when she stood beside him all these years. Not even when he had given her everything. Her heart had never been his to begin with, and now she thought she was finally getting what she had always wanted. Ethan watched as Olivia walked past him, humming softly to herself, her entire being radiating with happiness, a happiness she had never once shown for him. For years, he had made excuses. For years, he had hoped. For years, he had told himself that if he just waited long enough, she would turn and finally see him. But she never did, and she never would. So that night, Ethan Carter made the decision to let her go. Ethan Carter had imagined this moment before. He had thought about what it would feel like to finally walk away, to set himself free from a marriage that had never truly existed. He had wondered if it would be painful, if it would feel like ripping out a piece of himself. But now, as he sat across from Olivia in his law firm's conference room, watching her sign her name without hesitation, he realized the truth. There was nothing left to feel. "Just sign here," Ethan said, sliding the documents toward her. His voice was steady, emotionless, as if this was just another transaction, another contract. And to Olivia, that was all it was. She didn't even glance at him. Her attention was fixed on her phone, her fingers tapping the screen with absent-minded impatience. Waiting for Ryan. Ethan could see it in the way her lips pressed together, the way her breath hitched every time her phone vibrated. She didn't ask what the papers were for. Didn't read a single word. Just picked up the pen and signed. It took less than a minute to erase 3 years of marriage. Ethan stared at the signature on the page, at the name that had once meant everything to him. She had signed her name on their marriage certificate the same way. Carelessly, indifferently, as if it had never really mattered. And now, she had signed their divorce papers the exact same way. His fingers curled into a fist under the table, but there was no anger left. Only emptiness. He had loved her. He had fought for her. He had tried, over and over, to be enough. But in the end, it had never been a battle he could win, because Olivia Parker had never been his to begin with. She had belonged to a memory of someone else, and Ethan was done competing with ghosts. He gathered the papers, stood up, and pushed his chair back without a word. Olivia barely noticed. She was still staring at her phone, still waiting for a message that meant more to her than the man who had just walked out of her life. Ethan turned and left, stepping out into the crisp New York air. For the first time in years, he didn't look back. Olivia Parker had always believed that Ryan Thompson was her future. For years, she had convinced herself that what they had, or what she thought they had, was real, that eventually things would fall into place, that she just needed to wait for the right moment. And that moment had finally come. Or at least, she thought it had. It had been 2 weeks since she signed the papers in Ethan's office. 2 weeks since she had last seen him. 2 weeks since she had even thought about him. Because all that time, she had been waiting. For Ryan. She had heard the rumors, seen the signs. He and his wife had been having problems for months, and now it was finally happening. Divorce. So when she saw his name flash across her phone screen, her heart skipped a beat. But the words that followed destroyed her. Olivia, I wanted to tell you this myself. Emily and I are staying together. We've decided to work things out. She stared at the message, reading it over and over, as if the words would somehow change if she looked long enough. But they didn't. The dream she had held on to for years shattered in an instant. Ryan had never been hers. He never would be. And for the first time she saw just how foolish she had been. She set her phone down, staring at the empty space in front of her. Her apartment felt different, quieter. That was when she noticed it. Ethan's things were gone. His books, his clothes, even the mug he used for coffee every morning, all of it had disappeared. A sudden panic rose in her chest as she stood, moving through the apartment, opening closets, checking drawers. Nothing. Ethan was gone. Not just physically, completely. She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed his number. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Her breath caught. She tried again and again. Same result. Her hands clenched around the phone, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She had never really considered what would happen after the divorce. Ethan had always been there, always waited, always loved her, even when she didn't deserve it. But now, for the first time, she realized the truth. She had pushed him too far. And this time, he wasn't coming back. She went to his office the next morning, walking past the familiar front desk, expecting to find him in his usual corner office. But when she asked for him, the receptionist just blinked at her. Ethan Carter? He resigned 2 weeks ago. The words hit her like a physical blow. Resigned. He had erased himself from her life. She walked out of the office in a daze, the city moving around her, but she barely noticed. For the first time in her entire life, Olivia Parker felt truly, completely alone. And she had no one to blame but herself. Ethan Carter had spent too many years waiting, for love, for recognition, for something that had never been his to begin with. So this time, he didn't wait. 2 days after Olivia signed the divorce papers, he packed up everything that mattered, which, as it turned out, wasn't much, and left New York behind. Los Angeles was different. Warmer, brighter, freer. A place where no one knew him as Olivia Parker's husband. Where he could start over, not as someone's second choice, but as himself. The transition was easier than he expected. His startup, a private financial consulting firm, took off almost immediately. Without the weight of a loveless marriage dragging him down, he poured himself into his work, building something that was finally his. For the first time in years, he was moving forward. And then, he met her. It wasn't anything dramatic, no instant spark, no overwhelming rush of emotions. Just a simple conversation at a coffee shop, a casual exchange of smiles. Emma Brooks was different. She wasn't flashy, wasn't someone who walked into a room expecting attention. But she saw him, not as a placeholder, not as a convenient option, but as a man. She laughed at his dry humor, listened when he spoke, asked about his day like she actually cared. And maybe that was why, for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he wasn't invisible. Meanwhile, across the country, Olivia Parker was searching for a ghost. She called. No answer. She emailed. Nothing. She even reached out to mutual acquaintances, only to hear the same thing over and over. Ethan doesn't want to be found. And for the first time, she understood. He was gone. She had spent years ignoring the only man who had ever truly loved her, and now she was the one left waiting. But this time, Ethan Carter wasn't coming back. Years passed. New York remained the same towering skyline, the same crowded streets, the same endless cycle of people chasing things they might never have. But Olivia Parker had changed. She was still successful, still polished, still the woman people admired. But beneath it all, she was empty. Because some voids couldn't be filled. One evening, alone in her penthouse, Olivia scrolled absent-mindedly through social media, barely paying attention to the images flashing across her screen, until she saw his name. Her breath caught. It was a wedding photo. Ethan Carter, standing under a canopy of soft white lights, dressed in a sharp black suit, his hands gently wrapped around the waist of a woman in a flowing ivory gown, Emma Brooks. They were smiling, really smiling. Not the kind of smile used for the cameras, but something real, something full, something Olivia had never given him. She stared at the screen, at the way Ethan looked at her, the way he had once looked at Olivia. She set her phone down, but the image remained burned into her mind. Slowly, she glanced around the apartment. The same apartment she and Ethan had once shared. It felt different now, colder, quieter, because he had been the only thing that had ever made this place feel like a home. And he was gone. For the first time, Olivia truly understood what she had lost. She had let go of the only man who had ever loved her, and now he belonged to someone else, forever. And this time there was no getting him back. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future content.